My friends, please subscribe to my channel, like the video and write a comment, and we begin. Part 1. I invited everyone to a wonderful dinner for my birthday. It's my thing, you know? I'm not really a party person. The idea of a crowded bar or a noisy club fills me with a special kind of dread. But a carefully curated dinner party? That's my happy place. The soft glow of candlelight, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of thoughtful conversation. It's my ideal way to celebrate another year on this planet. I meticulously plan the menu weeks in advance, poring over cookbooks and food blogs for inspiration. I spend hours choosing the perfect wine pairings and crafting a playlist of background music that sets the right mood. And of course, the decorations are key. Seasonal flowers artfully arranged in vintage vases, crisp linen napkins, and handwritten place cards to make everyone feel special. It's my way of showing people that I care, that I appreciate their presence in my life. It's also just fun. I love the creativity of it all. The feeling of orchestrating a beautiful, memorable evening. So naturally, for my 25th birthday, I was going all out. Roasted duck with cherry sauce, creamy polenta with truffle oil, asparagus with lemon and parmesan. I had a vision, and I was determined to execute it flawlessly. That's when my brother, Liam, decided to inject a dose of his signature brand of cynicism into the situation. He just rolled his eyes and said, "Seriously, Claire? You're doing that again." His words weren't overtly mean-spirited. Liam wasn't usually mean, at least not intentionally. He just had this way of looking at the world, this slightly detached, sardonic perspective that always made me feel a little bit exposed, a little bit vulnerable. His tone was light, almost teasing, but his words definitely carried an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite decipher. It was like he was privy to some inside joke that I wasn't in on, a secret understanding of my personality that somehow rendered my carefully constructed birthday dinner ridiculous, even pathetic. I bristled, trying to maintain a nonchalant facade. "What's wrong with having a birthday dinner, Liam?" I asked, forcing a smile. "It's my birthday." "Nothing," he said, shrugging. "Just, it's just so you." His vague response only fueled my irritation. I narrowed my eyes, trying to read his expression, but he was already turning away, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. He was 2 years older than me, always the observer, always one step ahead. He'd always had this knack for picking up on my insecurities, for poking at the soft spots I tried so hard to conceal. I know it's pathetic, but the comment ruined the feeling I was experiencing as I thought about my party. Now, I was self-conscious. Maybe he was right. Maybe my birthday dinners were a little excessive. Maybe I was trying too hard, desperate to create some illusion of perfection that no one else really cared about. I brushed it off, chalking it up to sibling rivalry, to Liam's inherent need to be the contrarian. But a small seed of doubt had been planted. What was that, exactly? What was so inherently me about throwing a nice birthday dinner? And why did he find it so amusing? The questions swirled around in my head, threatening to derail my carefully laid plans. I knew, as I set about continuing with the planning for my party, it wouldn't be a very good birthday unless I shook these concerns. Part 2. As the days leading up to the dinner progressed, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with Liam's cryptic comment. It was like a tiny, persistent pebble in my shoe, an insignificant annoyance that gradually grew into a source of unbearable irritation. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something I didn't, that he was privy to some secret about me, about my personality, about my very being, that I was somehow blind to. He'd catch my eye across the room at random moments during dinner while we were watching TV, even when I was just walking through the hallway, and that knowing smirk would reappear, like a recurring character in a bad dream. It was a small, subtle expression, barely perceptible to anyone else, but it was enough to make my skin crawl, to send a shiver of unease down my spine. His eyes seemed to mock me. When I tried to bring it up again, to press him for some clarification, he just brushed me off with infuriating nonchalance. "Oh, nothing, Claire," he'd say, shrugging. "Just you being you." The emphasis on the word you was like a subtle jab, a suggestion that my very essence was somehow inherently amusing, or perhaps even flawed. He was being deliberately vague, deliberately evasive, and it was driving me absolutely crazy. I'm not usually one for confrontation, but Liam's behavior was starting to push me to my limit. I needed to know what he meant. I needed to understand what was so inherently ridiculous about my birthday dinners. I confided in my best friend Sarah, hoping she could offer some perspective, some reassurance that I wasn't completely losing my mind. Sarah, bless her heart, listened patiently to my increasingly frantic ramblings, offering the occasional sympathetic nod and the occasional well-timed eye roll at Liam's expense. "Liam's just being Liam," she said finally, after I'd finished ranting for what felt like an hour. "He's always been a bit of a, he likes to wind you up to get a reaction. Don't let him ruin your birthday, Claire. Just ignore him." Her words were comforting, in a way. I knew Sarah was right. Liam had always enjoyed teasing me, pushing my buttons, testing my limits. It was just his way of showing affection, I suppose. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than just sibling rivalry. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important, like there was a secret joke that everyone was in on except me. Perhaps this was the curse of the younger sister. The question was, what was the punchline? And even if I could learn to ignore it, was there something in what he said that was true? Was there something inherent to my being that I was hiding? This was more than just my birthday. This was about my very soul. This was about my identity. I felt sick. I tried to go back to organizing my party, but my hands were trembling. Part 3. The day of the dinner arrived, looming over me like a dark cloud. The morning had been a flurry of activity, last-minute grocery shopping, a frantic trip to the florist for emergency flower replacements. The lilies I'd ordered had mysteriously wilted overnight, and a near disaster with the cherry sauce that almost ended in a kitchen fire. I was stressed, exhausted, and increasingly convinced that this whole birthday dinner idea was a terrible mistake. But I refused to give in. I told myself that I was being ridiculous, that Liam was just being a jerk, and that everything would be fine once the guests arrived and the wine started flowing. I forced myself to focus on the task at hand, throwing myself into the preparations with a manic energy. Cooking always calmed me down, at least a little. The methodical chopping of vegetables, the rhythmic stirring of sauces, the basting of the roasted chicken with fragrant herbs and spices. It was a form of meditation, a way to quiet the anxious voices in my head. The aroma of herbs and spices filled the house, a comforting scent that momentarily chased away my anxieties, but only for a few short moments. As the afternoon wore on, I could feel Liam's presence hovering around me like a persistent shadow. He wasn't actively helping or even engaging in conversation. He just seemed to be watching me. He'd lean against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on me with that same knowing, slightly mocking expression. I would catch him staring and give him a quizzical look, to which he just would shrug. I tried to laugh it off, but it wouldn't work. I tried to ignore him, to focus on the details of the meal, but his presence was unnerving. It was like he was waiting for something to happen, anticipating some inevitable disaster, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he somehow knew what it was. Guests started arriving around 7, and soon the house was buzzing with conversation and laughter. My parents arrived first, followed by my aunt and uncle, and then a few close friends. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, complimenting the decorations, the aroma of the food, and the carefully curated playlist. They were all so oblivious. I was the only person who knew that disaster was around the corner. Except for Liam. He lurked in the corners of the living room, a detached observer amidst the cheerful chaos. He sipped his wine with a practiced nonchalance, his eyes darting around the room, occasionally settling on me with that same unnerving smirk. He just knew about me. I tried to engage him in conversation, hoping to break the tension, but he was strangely aloof, offering only monosyllabic responses and vague, unsettling comments. "Looks like you've really outdone yourself this year, Claire," he said at one point, his voice dripping with a subtle sarcasm. "It's quite the spectacle." Spectacle? It was a birthday party. What was he talking about? I felt like I was walking on eggshells, bracing myself for some inevitable explosion. The music seemed too loud, the laughter too forced, the decorations too perfect. Everything felt artificial, like a stage set designed to mask some deeper, darker truth. The seed of doubt that Liam had planted was starting to take root, growing into a gnawing sense of unease that threatened to consume me. Part 4. The dinner itself was a torturous affair, a carefully orchestrated performance that felt increasingly hollow and meaningless. I circulated among the guests, forcing smiles and engaging in polite conversation, all the while acutely aware of Liam's watchful gaze. He moved around the room like a shadow, popping up in unexpected places, always within earshot, always with that knowing smirk on his face. As the evening progressed, his behavior became increasingly unsettling. He started making cryptic comments, veiled references to past birthdays that I couldn't quite place, remarks seemingly innocuous to everyone else, but designed to torment me. He was dropping breadcrumbs, little hints to something secret. "Remember the year the cake spontaneously combusted?" he asked, casually, as he passed me while I was refilling Sarah's wine glass. The words were said with a smile, but they still haunted me. I frowned, trying to recall the incident. "What are you talking about, Liam?" I asked, my voice tight. He just shrugged, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Oh, the great birthday cake inferno of '08. Good times." I had no recollection of any such event. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of my childhood memories, but all I could come up with was a blank. Had I blocked out some traumatic birthday incident? Was Liam deliberately fabricating a false memory to mess with me? It seemed the only reasonable answer. But if that were the case, what did he stand to gain? Later, as we were clearing the table after the main course, he leaned in close to me, his voice a low whisper. "And who could forget the time the dog ate Aunt Carol's dentures?" The comment was so bizarre, so completely out of left field, that I almost burst out laughing. But then I saw the glint in Liam's eyes, the subtle challenge in his expression, and the amusement died in my throat. "Liam, stop it," I said, my voice barely audible. "You're being weird." He just smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Am I?" he said. "Or am I just reminding you of your unique birthday history?" No one else seemed to understand what he was talking about. My parents laughed politely, mistaking his comments for harmless jokes. Aunt Carol just chuckled good-naturedly, oblivious to the fact that her dentures had apparently once been devoured by a rogue canine. My friends just seemed confused. But I knew better. I knew that Liam wasn't just being funny. He was trying to tell me something. He was testing me. But what? Was there something dark hiding behind my meticulously planned birthday celebrations? Was there some secret, some repressed memory that was about to come crashing down on me? I felt increasingly isolated, surrounded by people who seemed to be living in a different reality. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and Liam was the only one who knew the rules. The guests continued to eat, but my appetite vanished. I moved in a haze. Part 5. The tension in the room had reached a fever pitch. Every clink of silverware, every murmured conversation, felt like a thunderclap, amplifying my anxiety. I was on the verge of a complete meltdown, convinced that Liam was about to unleash some unspeakable horror upon my carefully curated birthday dinner. I kept thinking of the cake from earlier, wondering if it had been poisoned. I kept thinking of Aunt Carol and wondering if she was secretly plotting against me. Everyone here was hiding a secret, and I was no longer invited. Finally, as everyone was digging into the rich, decadent chocolate cake, which I could barely bring myself to touch, Liam stood up, his eyes gleaming with a mischievous, almost manic glint. He cleared his throat, silencing the murmur of conversation. "Okay, everyone," he announced, his voice booming with theatrical flair, "it's time for Claire's birthday tradition." A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the room. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. Aunt Carol choked on her wine. Sarah, bless her heart, just looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. "Claire's tradition?" my mother asked, her brow furrowed. "What tradition?" "Oh, Liam said, waving his hand dismissively. "Every year, Claire picks one unsuspecting guest to receive a special gift." He paused, letting the suspense build to an almost unbearable level. I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. What was he planning? What was he about to reveal? "A special gift?" Aunt Carol repeated, her voice trembling slightly. What kind of gift? I could feel the blood draining from my face. I suddenly remembered a birthday from years ago. It was the birthday where I told my friends that I was going to pick a guest to receive a wonderful gift at the end of the night. It was just a normal gift and nothing to be ashamed of. Then Liam began to tell everyone the story that the gift was a lock of my hair, my own nail clippings, and various hairs pulled from the drain of my shower, all sealed in a jar to protect them. He laughed maniacally and then pointed a finger at me. I have proof. A look of horror spread across my friends' faces. I was mortified, but the fear didn't stop there. Would he be revealing more things? Would he tell my parents about my terrible grades? The jar of my DNA appeared in his hands and handed it to Sarah. Sarah started to laugh, a loud, unrestrained belly laugh that shook her entire body. Slowly, hesitantly, everyone else in the room followed suit. Even Aunt Carol started to giggle, her dentures clicking merrily in her mouth. It was then that I remembered everything. It was your birthday tradition until you turned like 10, Claire, Liam said, still chuckling. Don't worry, you gave up the weird DNA gifts and picked normal presents from the store from then on. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense that I almost collapsed. The fear, the anxiety, the paranoia, it all vanished in an instant, replaced by a surge of laughter and a profound sense of, well, embarrassment. The memory came flooding back to me, vivid and slightly horrifying. It was true. As a child, I had been obsessed with the idea of giving special gifts, tokens of my affection that were, in retrospect, deeply unsettling. The jar of my DNA was the culmination of this bizarre childhood phase, a relic of my preteen weirdness that Liam had gleefully resurrected for my 25th birthday. But the best part? The story had gotten increasingly exaggerated to what Sarah found funny, and I had almost forgotten it. He showed Sarah an empty jar with the label Claire's Special Edition on it. It was all one big joke. All these years I was worried. All these years I was scared. And all I had to do was be honest.